So let's talk a little bit about Mike Israetel of Renaissance Periodization, one of the most popular YouTube fitness influencers that there is. I mean, come on. Mike Israetel, everybody has seen this guy, everybody has seen his dome, everybody has probably seen that oh so famous leg curl screaming like a maniac. Look, I've done some previous videos here on this channel where I've talked about Mike Israetel and how I'm not a big fan of him and I don't like the nonsense that he spews. And finally, it has happened. Mike Israetel has officially fallen. He is the joke of the fitness industry. And sadly, Jeff Nippard has also kind of caught a bit of it, maybe not as bad, because he's not the one involved so much in the direct controversy. But, well, he sort of is. But, we'll talk about that as well. So, what happened to Mike Israetel? You probably know at this point because this information is pretty old. But I figured I'd talk about it anyway because it's still radiating throughout the fitness industry to this day. And it's important because I wanted to do this video not to tell you about the news, but to tell you about the information out there and how you have to be careful. And I talked about this in my previous videos that I've put here on this channel so far. So Mike Israetel got caught. His PhD has been greatly compromised. That's the whole thing that Mike Israetel always talks about. And the one thing that I never liked about the guy, he's very pompous. He's very conceited. He thinks he knows it all because he has a PhD. And, to get a PhD, that's no laughing matter. That's no joke. That is something that someone should be proud of. I mean, you worked very hard to get that PhD. And, you deserve to kind of, be proud. You could talk about it, but Mike Israetel mentions it all the time without fail. And he links it to basically everything he tells you, as a PhD. He's also talked about how he's one of the smartest in the fitness industry. And obviously, now, that really isn't the case because you'll see just how, not smart he is. And, he also is always criticizing people who are bigger than him. And the funny thing is, Mike is on steroids. The man is on steroids, and yet he's critiquing and saying that he's better than other people that are on steroids. And making himself seem like he's better and not seem. He says that he is. This man is critiquing Sam Sulek's routine, and he's also on record saying he's bigger and stronger than Mike Mentzer.
Who am I compared to Mike Mentzer? Well, I'm bigger and stronger than Mike Mentzer. I'm more educated than Mike Mentzer. I know more things than Mike Mentzer. That's it.
Mike Mentzer was a massive individual, one of the most impressive bodybuilders, one of my personal favorite. And you want to talk about intelligence. A man like Mike Mentzer has Mike Israetel beat. And the thing is, when it comes to Mike, he has contradicted himself time and time again. And you can see how this is, how this kind of makes sense because what happened with the man's PhD, if you don't know? So basically, the guy got caught submitting a PhD and it's somehow being approved by having a ton of errors in it and misusages of punctuation and everything. So another YouTuber by the name of Solomon Nelson found this. And it was, uploaded to the college's website that Mike attended to get his PhD. And yeah, it's a fucking mess. It's a horrible thesis is what it was. If you, to get a PhD, You have to submit a thesis after you complete all your classes, of course. I don't have a PhD, but it's hard work. I know some people who have PhDs, and yeah, it's tough. You have to get a lot of credits, go through a lot of classes. So, Mike has done that. But how hard he worked and how much he truly learned while getting that PhD is something else entirely, because the thesis that was submitted looks like it was submitted by someone with a pretty low IQ, someone that is not really up to the task, who really shouldn't even be going for a PhD or anywhere even close to it. So this is the thing here. So once he got exposed in Solomon Nelson's video, magically on the website, they tried editing the shit. Yeah. They actually went on the site and somehow requested it for it to be edited, and it still was not up to par. And it still contained errors. What a nightmare for Mike Israetel, and very well deserved, because people that spread misinformation, especially when it comes to the fitness industry, all for the sake of getting more clicks, more subscribers, and making more money. And Mike Israetel, has unabashed pride about this, because he's even talked about having a Ferrari. I don't know if he's actually telling the truth, but the guy makes a lot of money. He sells a lot of products. He sells the, Renaissance periodization training programs. So the man is making some serious bank. And this motherfucker, right? He's actually, selling all this, telling us he's smarter than Mike Menzer, that he's bigger and stronger, and saying all these people, are wrong and everything, and he's right. Meanwhile, this guy is doing curls on a mat, laying down on a bench, not on an incline, mind you, but laying down a bench, doing curls with 10-pound dumbbells, and talking about stretches, and telling us all this about, training to failure. But then he himself doesn't train to failure, but he makes Jeff Nippard train to failure. I mean, this guy is fitness content. I remember I watched a few of his videos where he was like critiquing people, and I remember I hit subscribe, because I was like, oh, this is pretty good. But then I started to see that first, what it was before the misinformation part, it was the part where Mike Israetel just starts going in, with these sex jokes. And I talked about this in the past, and Greg Doucette has called him out a number of times. A lot, look, okay, sex jokes, they're very cheap. I'm not really a fan. I'm not going to ostracize somebody for telling a sex joke, but if you're telling like 5 sex jokes, and then, telling these jokes where like you're acting like you're homosexual, even though you're not, it's just, stupid sounding. It really is. It's very, very dumb, and I don't like it. I mean, honestly, like if you're telling jokes like that on a daily basis, or, on a video by video basis, you're immediately going to like lose my interest, because that's low effort, that's poor comedy, that's low brow, that's stupid, that's dumb, that's moronic, and it's not for me. So I unsubscribed from him. And then, I checked out like a few more videos, and then people critiquing him. And then I realized Mike Israetel's full of shit. He's 1 week he's saying something is great, or, 1 year, and then the next year he's saying it's bad. He's criticizing, lat pull downs. He's criticizing hammer curls. He's criticizing, like, just for the heck of criticizing, because he needs new content. He needs new content, because there's only so many things that you could talk about when it comes to fitness. But, what about that PhD? It never seemed like Mike Menzer ever had anything, like he was running out of topics. He always had information on nutrition and philosophy behind fitness, and, but somehow Mike Israetel, he just gets, writer's block, so to speak, and I can't figure out new topics. So the only thing he can think to do is just, change his mind about various things and contradict himself, basically. And, the thing is, this guy's training style is just outrageous. You just watch him, you watch his form, you just watch the fact that he's like doing 30 reps for something with like minimal effort. He's also telling people to stop very short of failure. And this reps and reserve thing that he's got going, it's some of the biggest mumbo jumbo I've ever seen. And he does the type of thing that like Jeff Cavalier does, where I noticed as he's talking, he just over talks so much and just goes on a tangent about things and over explaining and makes it like it's so technical, and yet it's not. And if you take the time to listen to like Mike Menser, or even Jeff Nippard, makes a lot more sense than this guy. And this is the thing that's always annoyed me about Jeff Nippard, and that is his undying love for Mike Israetel. That's always bothered me. I've liked Jeff. I've gotten, I was inspired to do a full body program last year thanks to Jeff, and a little bit of the beginning of this year, it bled into. And, I made some really good gains on it. I was extremely happy, so I was like, yeah, I like the inspiration. I wasn't, the biggest fan of the programs that he wrote, but, and was selling. But I tweaked certain things, and I was like, I like the inspiration. I like the idea. I don't really like the idea of like leaving so many reps in reserve like Jeff does. I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think that's a smart way of training. But, I think that he has a lot of good information. There's a lot of good videos that Jeff has put forth. I like his exercise tier lists, when it comes to body parts, like his tier list for the triceps and the biceps. Very good, entertaining stuff. But Jeff and Milo Wolf, of course, had to come to Mike Israetel's rescue and say that they're not buying it. Finally, more evidence was provided, and we got to see more about this PhD and the fact that things were being changed. And guess what? Guess what, folks? Jeff looked dead wrong, and Milo Wolf looked dead. Well, Milo Wolf is always wrong. I've never, Milo Wolf has no credibility, in my opinion. All of this guy's training methods, everything that this guy says and does, very pretentious, know it all, and I don't like him. Jeff, I like, but my opinion is starting to wane on him due to this mindless defense of Mike Israetel. And I get it, you got to defend your friends and everything. But then we found out that Jeff Nippard has been a client of Solomon Nelson, and Solomon Nelson even exposed some pretty brain dead training programs that Jeff Nippard still had up on his website, still was selling that schlock, telling people to do pretty heavy bench press, for a certain amount of reps that just did not seem possible. It did not. So it was, very telling. And so what we see here is the destruction of careers. Mike Israetel is completely finished. Not a shred of credibility left. And also his people were not seeing it, but his content was complete shit. And it was for a very, very long time. Greatly compromised stuff. Just basically there for the algorithm to make people question what they're doing. But Jeff should have not been defending Mike Israetel. He advocated for this man for so long, made like, in videos, you see him video calling Mike Israetel, obviously in a very scripted fashion, of course, but, be there as it may, he put a lot of stock in Mike Israetel, so it definitely doesn't look good on Jeff. And the fact that when it came out that he was compromised and caught red-handed with this seriously compromised PhD thesis that you know, he should have not been so quick to defend, and he did. So now, what do we have here? We have a fitness world that is full of liars and people that are deceptive. And this is where we need to learn the lesson. We need to stop listening to these people. We need to stop listening to the charlatans. We need to stop listening to every little thing these people say that are causing you to change your training program 1,000 times. And I will tell you something. I used to do this as well. Like, I'd stick to a body part, but I'd always see exercise online and want to try them out. And it would fuck with things. And I was still making progress because I was still sticking to certain lifts. But this was always a bane of my existence when it came to fitness. I would always want to try doing these things. Now, of course, I wasn't as bad as other people. I was always sticking to the basics, always sticking to my curls, but always, varying the different type, but I was always trying to find the best stimulus, in a different exercise. I always was like, oh, this one looks good. This one has more of a stretch. This one here, this one there, this one everywhere. And you know what? It was a complete waste of time because I learned you just got to pick your exercises and stick with them and rarely change them. And that is all that these fitness influencers have is the exercising and the training programs. And, there's a lot of information out there about these supplements being quite worthless. And so it's getting harder and harder for them to kind of push this stuff. They have succeeded in some respects. Still the supplement industry is still doing very well. But if they're not selling you supplements, they're trying to tell you about different exercises or discrediting different exercises. Oh, this one doesn't have a stretch. People, they'll for example, they'll tell you don't do lateral raises with the dumbbells because there's no tension at the bottom of the lift. Even though we see legions and legions of bodybuilders doing lateral raises with dumbbells, and somehow it's just everything is on a cable, everything has to have an insane stretch, or we're just not going to be getting our gains, when it's completely false. Everybody everywhere is always like taking these classic lifts and saying that they're bad. Look, guys, you can do your own thing. You have to, you can take some of this information is correct and a lot of it's incorrect. You just need to know how to wade through it and pick out the correct stuff. You don't have to do any one exercise. Look, I've never ever done deadlifts. I've never done deadlifts, and somehow I've managed to achieve a pretty impressive physique. So I have to say that anyone that tells you that you need to deadlift or you need to bench press, there's other exercises for the chest. Now, I would personally recommend that you do some form of the bench press or some form of a chest press, either whether it's on a machine or otherwise. I wouldn't just recommend just doing flies or pec deck, but once again, that is up to you. Maybe you've had success that way. I think you could achieve a pretty decent chest by doing flies but I think you're lacking an important stimulus. But there's certain things that you don't need to do, like, putting your back at risk for a deadlift, because let's face it, you're lifting very, very heavy on there, even heavier than you would for a bench press in most cases. Your deadlift is always going to be more than your bench. And, if one small thing is off, it can lead to big injury, and then you're not going to be able to do a lot of the other lifts. So from someone that has had scoliosis surgery, I would not recommend it, unless you have seen that that is a game changer for you. So, just keep in mind, I'm already saying it. I've never done the lift, but I have seen people in the gym who deadlift religiously. And I'm just saying, it's not to sound conceited. Trust me, I am not. I know how many people are so much bigger than me. But I have seen people that I am bigger than that they deadlift religiously and I do not. So, be that as it may, I think that's proof right there that you don't need to do certain lifts. Everybody has their own stimulus that works for them, and you just need to find it. So don't let Mike Israetel, shame you into, doing certain exercise and forgetting about others, because he is just a really corny salesman at the end of the day. And that is pretty much it. So, yeah, you have to learn to ignore these people on Instagram, on TikTok, on Facebook. I see it all the time. Stop. I've seen it even where people are showing things with form and they're doing almost the exact same form, but just doing something a little different. It is ridiculous. It is laughable. And it won't. I was going to say it needs to stop, but it won't stop. What needs to stop is you listening to it, basically. So with that in mind, guys, I hope you all enjoyed the video. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Click the bells to get all the notifications when I post all my new videos. I want to thank all my subscribers for continued support. And thank you all for watching. I'll see you next time.